Thank you for joining us on another episode of Blueprint to Ultra. We appreciate all the feedback we've received so far. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, and share with your friends. Our guest today is an accomplished host of the Golden Hour Adventures podcast, along with Robbie Pike. Follow him on Instagram, and you will see that the bottom line is he is all about bringing the fun to ultras. Since May of 2020, he has completed 5 100-mile races and a variety of other distances ranging from 50K to 100 miles, and now has his sights set on the Cowboy 200 for September 2025. As an ultra runner, a podcast host in the ultra scene, and as a certified ultra running coach, our guest tonight brings a wealth of knowledge and experience for us today. So stick around and listen to the show, as you will absolutely be able to add some elements to your own ultra blueprint. With that, I want to thank Justin Andreas for joining us on the show. Justin, welcome aboard.
Hey, thanks. What an introduction. I don't know if I've ever been introduced that well, so bravo to you.
So funny, Steve. As you're going through that, I'm watching Justin's face and he's like, what do I say? Do I smile? I'm not sure what to do with this because I'm not sure how I'm supposed to respond. But yeah, man, it's awesome and it's very nice to meet you.
Yeah, absolutely. Nice to meet you guys, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, we like to stalk sometimes.
Yeah, you did. You did your due diligence, I will say.
We try, and that's kind of where we start. I know you probably answered this a million times, but how did you get into running? How did you get into ultra running?
Oh wow, that is a good question. So in high school, I ran track. I was the 400 guy in track. There's always that 400 guy. I was too slow for the mile, and I was also too slow for the 100. So they said, "Hey, you're a perfect 400 kind of guy." I hated that race, but I was really good at it. And then, I'm also active duty military. So I've been serving in the Air Force for 18 years. And it's a requirement in the military to run 1.5 miles as a test every year. And from the time that I entered the military in 2006 to 2017, I did exactly that. I ran 1.5 miles every year. But in 2017, I was stationed in Guam, which is a little island in the Pacific, having fun out there on the island. And there was a half marathon. It was the Guam International Marathon, and they had a half as an option. And I had a buddy that I call him a semi-pro triathlete who runs all the time and does all the triathlete type deals. And so I asked him, I said, "Hey, what do you think it would take for me to run this half marathon next year?" And he's like, "What do you mean next year?" He's like, "You can do it this year." This is 4 weeks before the half marathon. And I'm thinking to myself, like, that's 13 miles. The most I've ran this year is 1.5 miles. I don't understand how I'm going to do this. And so he developed me a little plan for 4 weeks, peaking out at 10 miles for the long run, went out there, crushed the half marathon, and fell in love with running. Decided at that time I was going to do the marathon the next year. And so, I picked up my running. I'm a real handsy kind of guy. I know you can't see this on the podcast, but I'm just using all kinds of hand gestures. So anyway, the marathon the next year in 2018, I trained all year and, went out and also crushed the marathon. And by crushed, I mean, my time was like probably 5 or 6 hours, but in my mind, I crushed it. Even to this day, I still think I finished that race. I crushed that race. I don't care what anybody else says. I'm running for myself. And so, yeah. And I absolutely hated the marathon. And I was like, this is the stupidest thing. Why do people run 26 miles on the road? And it was an out and back. So, 13 and a half down, 13, whatever, back. And I was like, this is so dumb. We started at 3 a.m. because it gets so hot in Guam that they have to start that early so the temperatures won't, affect you. But what they don't plan on is me running a 6-hour marathon. And of course the temperatures are going to affect me. So I'm just come in. I just remember just like, oh, this was terrible. So, as I'm doing my training for the marathon, I listened to music a little bit when I was doing my half marathon training, but I was talking to people like, what kind of stuff do you listen to when you're running? And a lot of people said they listen to podcasts. So that's kind of where my introduction to podcasts came. And I started listening to running podcasts. And the first thing I found was a podcast called 10 Junk Miles with Scotty Coomer. I'm sure everybody in this running scene knows Scotty Coomer and the 10 Junk Miles podcast. But anyway, all of them are ultra runners. And I'm like, that they run on trail, they're describing their aid stations. I'm like, man, this sounds so cool. How do I get into this? And so 2019, I started trail running. In 2019, I moved to South Dakota in the Black Hills, and I signed up for my first ultra in 2020, a 50 miler. And of course, we all know what happened in 2020.
Oh.
So
Okay.
something happened, I guess. So I went out and I just ran a 50K to say that now that I'm an ultra marathoner. And so me and a couple friends went out and I ran a 50K. I ran it overnight of all things, like started at like midnight and finished at like 6 a.m. because, that I thought that's what ultra runners do. They run through the night. So why not?
Why not?
Yeah. And then they had this race that they actually got approved to run in the city. It was a 24-hour race in 2020. It was a 3.8 mile loop with about 400 to 500 foot of gain per loop. And I ended up running 19 laps. It was like 73 miles, 10 to 11,000 foot of climb. And that was my very first, and up until this time, very last podium spot. So I think I got third place out of maybe 3 people. So I felt pretty accomplished in that, and And from
You
there,
crushed it, man.
Yeah, I crushed it, right? I literally
it, just
crushed
like
it.
the marathon.
I got a podium spot. So
you don't ever have to say how
if you
many
look-
people were in it.
Well, but I think that's part of who I am. I have to tell people like I was 3 of 3. I mean, I got a podium, but yeah, it was only 3 people I was competing with.
So, let me just interject for a second. So a lot of people who get into ultra running have some sort of motivation to get into it. Either it's some weight loss journey, it's some drug addiction, it's some sort of thing that has pulled them into the scene that inspired them, right? You got exposed because you were doing 1.5 miles every year in the military. You had a friend who got you and did a half marathon. You then jumped to the marathon. But what pulled you to, other than 10 junk miles, like what pulled you into saying, I think I want to go further. I think I want to challenge myself. I want to put myself out there in a race that is going to test a part of me that maybe I didn't think I could do, because it's a little bit different to jump from a marathon to signing up for a 50 miler.
Yeah, for sure. I don't feel like I have a why. I don't have a cool story. Everybody always has these like super interesting, cool stories. Like, man, I was so deep into, whatever. And
Whatever.
ultra running pulled me back in, and made me whole again. I don't have that. I feel like I was just a typical dude. Like, I'm in the military. I've run a marathon. I was like, cool, let's see what I can, do. But now I think that my mind has shifted a little bit. The 100 mile, as you guys know, will do that to you, forces you to shift yourself a little bit. It's a test against myself. And I'm sure we'll get into some of the races that I've done a little bit later on, but some of the races that I've done have been self-supported, and it's always just this next thing. Like, how far can I push myself? Maybe not in distance, but like, your attitude towards something, or the ability to achieve something that is really, really hard on top of the 100 miles. And so I think that's just what it is for me now. It's just, let me see what I can do.
Yeah, but that's a good draw. And I think that's a draw that a lot of people have. And again, like you said, there are people who have these war stories that bring them in, but then there's other folks who have just been everyday individuals that are living their life, and something about the sport begins to pull them in, and they're like, I kind of like that. I didn't know I could do that.
Yeah.
And now what else can I do? And I think that story actually mirrors a lot of folks out there too. I think it's good to hear it.
Well, also now I've made it my whole identity as an ultra runner. So I feel like I can't let anybody down now.
So when we scroll through your Instagram account, we look at your social media, we kind of get your persona. I mean, we know that fun is very, very important to you. But why? Like, why is it that you want to bring this element of fun to the sport? Because it is an area that a lot of people kind of think of. Let me rephrase this. A lot of people get into the sport thinking it's all about grit, all about toughness, all about like, how hard can I push myself? Let me Goggins my way through this event, right? But you want to paint another picture of this, that this can be fun. And this is what your entire social media influence looks like when we scroll through it and kind of see what it's about. Why is that important to you to kind of present that side of it?
Great question. I think that I consider myself the anti-Goggins, if that makes sense. Love what Goggins says, and I love his message to a point. I think that you should push yourself, because how do you know what you're made of unless you go out and you physically, whether it be physically, mentally, push yourself to that next level? You don't have a clue what your potential is until you do that. But there is a certain point, right? I'm not going out and doing it for how he does it. Like, I want to keep my knees and don't want to go through 4 knee surgeries and all the issues that Goggins has had. Like, I don't want to do that. But at the same time, I running is a hobby for 99.9% of us. Why do we take it so dang seriously? I just don't get it. Like, and I get trolled all the time, and I clap back at every single one of them, because I find everybody's like, oh, ignore the trolls. Like, no, man, that's the fun part about it. Like, I have a lot of videos where I talk about walking on a trail, and it's like, the professional ultra runners also walk on a trail. Why is it such a big deal? I don't get it. But to me, it's all about having fun. Like, your body is able to take you to places that no one else can go, right? And I often go out on these trails. I live in Alaska, so I sometimes go out on these super remote trails. And we sometimes just stop and stare at like what's out there. And like, we might have only been here with a couple other people, right? Who else has stood in this spot? I just think that's the coolest thing. Like, stop and smell the flowers, like being out in nature, enjoying the trail, enjoying nature, and just having a good time. And that's the kind of social media presence that I want to have. I just want to show people that having fun and running can happen together.
Yeah, I agree a lot. I think that, I often say the fact that I'm grateful for the fact that my feet can take me to places that I never dreamed they could have when I was years ago, like younger and all that. When I look at people like my age and even younger than me that just don't have that sense of mobility to kind of do that, this is a side of the sport that I just appreciate that I get to be a part of, because I do get to see things that you can't drive to. Like, you can't always drive to these spots. You got to take your feet to get to them. And so it's one of the things about the sport I really like. Now, if you're really, really fast, you probably don't see the same things I see.
No.
Yeah.
You definitely
I see a lot
don't.
of things. I see a lot of things in the dark, that's for sure, on a lot of my races.
I love seeing the videos of the perspective from the pro runner and the perspective from the mid to backpack, and it's just black.
Yeah.
Because we're seeing it at night. It's so funny.
I was gonna say, I think I've found that runners who I would say move from that marathon distance into trying to get into ultras a little bit, they may be taken aback at some of the, I would say, like, lightheartedness or the environment that surrounds ultras, where it is, look, it's competitive, right? But for the most part, you're competing with yourself, and and everybody's kind of competing with the course. Whereas like the marathon, and what I found, like half marathon and road running, is you are competing against each other, and everybody's asking, look, nobody asked me my splits on Mogollon. Nobody asked me my splits on Cocodona 250. So it's like, but if you do a marathon, that's the first thing somebody asks you, like, what was your finish time? Did you PQ? Did you do this? So I think that's where a lot of people put a lot of pressure on themselves on that. And then it takes a little bit, and I know it took a little bit for me to get away from that. Like, when I got into ultra running, like, hey, like, it can be fun. It's serious, but it is fun. Like, this stuff's hard, but let's go suffer in enjoyment, I guess.
Yeah, I've worked with quite a few athletes that are making that transition from road running to trail running, and from marathoning to ultra marathoning. And that's something that they do struggle with. It's like, in road running, it's kind of frowned upon to stop and walk during your run. And that, from what I've noticed, like, and all my trolls tell me that that's not a thing that you should do, because you're not a real runner if you walk during your run. But, but I see it a lot, that it is a struggle of theirs, that they feel like they have to run the whole time. I'm like, you're going on a 20-mile run with 4,000 foot of climb. You're not going to run the whole time. I can guarantee you that. I promise you that. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, I agree. So we're all coaches, like, on this, which is makes for a fascinating conversation for some of these questions, I think, because when you think about this idea of fun, I definitely encourage my athletes that I work with to keep things fun, to maintain a positive attitude, to maintain a sense of gratitude, even like I said earlier. Like, it's really important that they have that healthy perspective of that, I think. The challenge is that when they get into a long training block or an endurance block where they're trying to build for a 100-mile or something to that effect, it's hard to always help them see that being fun. So how do you encourage your athletes to stay fun on a run that sucks?
That's a good, how does anyone do that?
Right?
I myself struggle with that. So,
because
man.
that's the issue, right? Because I've tried to paint that picture for folks I'm working with, and as influencer, you do the same thing as a content creator. You're trying to help them see this fun, but we know like it's hard. And there are days that it's hard, and so I think helping to create that balance is important. So really, the question is how do we help our athletes have that balance of understanding between the two?
One thing that I try to encourage my runners is when they're in those big blocks and those big weekends where there's probably going to be a 20-miler followed by, whatever the next day, I encourage them to go do a different trail that they may have not done before and take in a new environment and explore that new trail. Just because it's, if you're running the same trail over and over and over and you're building, from your 10 to your 20, 25, 30-mile training run on that one trail, it's like, I'm going to be bored to sin. Like, there's no way I can have fun doing this. So I always try to encourage them, like, go see something different. Go run a different trail. Go run a different route if you don't have trails. Go find somewhere new to explore and take a couple pictures while you're out there. Stop, enjoy the beauty. Like your 20 mile, 25, 30, whatever your training run is for that block is going to be 6, 8, 10, maybe hours of training. Like, walk a little bit, enjoy it, take pictures, have fun with it. And so that's what I try to do. I just try to encourage them to go run a new route that they haven't run before. And so, it's tough. It really is. And that's what I do myself. Like, if I've got a 20, 25 miler on deck for a Saturday, I'm going to go somewhere new to run, just for the fact that if you're just running the same route over and over, like, okay, I'm at mile 8. I know what I got coming up. It just gets boring.
I try to help mine understand the difference that you can have fun and it can be tough. Understand that when I say we want to have fun with this sport, I'm not saying it's easy.
Yeah.
Like, I think we can misconstrue this idea of it being fun with, it's just easy.
Yeah, it's not easy at all.
And I think that's the one little piece that I'm always like, don't forget, nobody's told you this is going to be easy. I told you can have a lot of fun and you can explore and kind of see a lot of different things, and you can do things you never thought you could do before, but it may not be easy.
And I think we saw a lot of that this weekend at Javelina, right?
100%,
everybody's watching the live stream of Javelina, and it's like, that
Carnage.
race is fun. It's a blast to be there. I've never been there, but I've watched it every year on live stream. Like, the party that's going on at Jackass Junction at the headquarters, like, such a great freaking time, but it's also 100 freaking degrees outside.
Yeah.
Like,
It's a little bit.
that is not fun. That's brutal. And so, it's like, that's the hard part. You're still running 100K, 100-mile race in the middle of all the fun, right? So you can still have fun, but just know that it's going to be freaking hard to do that with the heat, the temperatures, the exposure. And so I think that's a prime example of exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah, they had a DNF rate of 44%. I saw. Like, to me, it was carnage. It was like carnage, carnage in a carnival.
Oh yeah,
Like, they were having a great time.
Yeah, I'm the complete opposite, where I'm a creature of habit. So every day during the week, I hit the same exact trail, do the same exact thing over and over again, because I know this is the mileage that I need. I know this is the elevation that I need to get my elevation for the week. But I also realize that it's not the same trail over and over again, just because the nature of being out there, something's going to be different along the way. You're going to see somebody different out there. You're going to see a different view, different time of day. And that's kind of what makes it fun for me a little bit. Just knowing that, I don't know if I forget what it is. If it was probably one of those Jim Muir or whatever, where he said, like, if you go to a trail, you're not the same, and that trail's not the same because you've been there. I'm completely paraphrasing, butchering it, but that's kind of what makes it fun for me.
That's good. Do you mind if we switch gears a little bit? I want to talk about one of your races.
Yeah, for sure. Go for it.
So there's a couple of them as we were digging through your history, like you heard with the introduction that Steve gave. We did some stalking, like we did research on you because we want to be prepared and to honor you as our guest, right?
Yeah, I appreciate
we
that.
want to do that. And so as we were digging through some of your race resume and some of the things that you've accomplished, one of the first ones we want to talk about was your experience at the White Mountains 100. Now, before you say a word, I'm going to read to you the description from the website that I pulled off because when I did, kind of doesn't sound like a lot of fun, but
Not
let me
fun
read
at
it to you,
all.
right? It says the White Mountains 100 is a dangerous wilderness race. I mean, just starts with the first sentence. It's a dangerous wilderness race. Participants must seriously consider the ramifications of not being prepared physically and mentally for a race of this caliber. Racers will be exposed to environmental and physical conditions that will stress the body to the point of exhaustion. Racers must be self-sufficient and have the ability and will take and the will. This is the key piece that just got my attention. So let me repeat it. Racers must be self-sufficient and have the ability and will to care for themselves. Like you got to want to care for yourself, the website says. So to me, as we just talked about, we got to make this fun. Justin, this race may have given you a lot of content, but does not sound like a lot of fun. What drew you to this race? And you did this in March of 2024, I believe.
I suffered on that one. I will say that. So let me start the conversation about the White Mountain 100 by outlining how the race goes, right? So this is a winter race in Alaska in March. Should be enough to start the conversation, right? It is a typical winter ultra where they allow fat bikers, cross-country skiers, and then runners. And then that's the order that everyone finishes because the bikers are fast, the skiers are also fast, and the runners are slogging in the back. Everyone looks at the cutoff and they're like, "Oh, I can do 100 miles in that time frame." And then this time frame is 40 hours. That's the cutoff for this race. It is a self-sufficient race. You have to carry everything that you're going to need for the entire 100 miles. There is no crew access. There is no pacers. There is a trail. Out of 100 people that entered the race, there was 11 runners. All the runners kind of group up and run together. So they help each other out. As the day and the night goes on, everybody kind of spreads out, but you usually have somebody you're running with. So it's you and another person that are kind of connected and run together. The checkpoints are 20 to 25 miles apart. And notice I didn't say aid station. I said checkpoints. Mm-hmm. So at these checkpoints, they have like day old soup and they will refill your water. And so you know, everybody's like, "Oh, take your nutrition. Don't rely on the aid stations." Well, you definitely cannot rely on these checkpoints because they don't have, they have food, but it's not stuff to sustain you for another 25 miles. It was my fourth 100 that I'd run. And it was to date the hardest one that I've done. Just because it was so mentally draining, knowing that the next checkpoint, I mean, you're leaving a checkpoint. I left checkpoint 2, I think at like 6 p.m., knowing I have 25 miles to get to the next checkpoint. It's starting to get dark out. So the temperature is dropping drastically. And this is the point where you climb a divide. It's actually called the divide. You climb up over this mountain divide and oh my gosh, crazy hard. The temperatures during the day was a lot warmer than what it had been in the past. It was 40 degrees. And people are like, "Oh, that's still cold." But I live in Alaska. And so 40 degrees in March is like smoking hot. I was wearing tights, like real thin tights, but a lot of the runners were wearing shorts. And then I had like a t-shirt on. It was a long sleeve, just a t-shirt and in 40 degrees. But what that did to the snow is it turned it to like running on mashed potatoes or sand. It was difficult to run on. At night, it dropped down to about -10, which is kind of where we like to run in the wintertime because it hardens the snow. It's good running. But because it was 40 degrees in the daytime, a lot of the water from the creeks and that type of stuff started to rise. And so now we have overflow and we're dealing with tons of ice. And so my feet fell through ice. It was a nightmare. Really, it was. I changed socks about 6 times on the race just because they would get wet from the wet snow. And that's the last thing you want is wet feet when it's, starting to drop down into those temperatures. My pack weighed at the beginning, it weighed about 25 pounds. I ran with a 30-liter fast pack and it weighed about 25 pounds. Obviously, the weight went down as I ate my food as I was going. I carried 2, I don't know what brand they are, but they're just 2 like tall bottles that are double insulated that have, they won't freeze. Because that was one thing I was really worried about is my water freezing. Normally in the wintertime when we run, we just wear our packs and then we wear a jacket over the top of our pack. And so that keeps, the water from freezing. But, when you got to carry all this crap for 100 miles, you can't necessarily wear that under your jacket. So I had this massive 30-liter pack that I was carrying, and everybody else is the same. They're just got this huge pack. Also, you don't know like really what the temperature is going to do, right? So you may start the race in one thing, and I think it was probably like 20 degrees when we started, but we had the wind was blowing like crazy. So it was kind of cold when we started, but then as the day progressed, it got hotter. And so we're stripping gear off and then you have a bunch of stuff in your pack. Cause if it drops down to -30, you got to have the gear to be able to survive at -30. And yeah, so, a couple of years ago, they had a pack of wolves like tracking a runner during the night. And so it's like, during our race brief, they told us the furthest point from a road in the wilderness in the lower 48 is 13 miles, and that's in Yellowstone National Park. So the furthest point from a road is 13 miles. While I was on that race, the furthest point from a road was 22 miles. So if you need help, you're pretty far out there. Now they did have medics that were on snow machines, snowmobiles, running up and down. So you may see them every couple hours. You may see the snow machine running around. But the kicker is if you DNF, you got to pay $200 to get taken out. So a DNF comes with a fee.
Plus the entry fee that you've already paid.
Yeah, plus the entry fee. Yep.
So I assume you all wore like trackers and stuff so they could monitor where you were.
We did have trackers. Yeah, we had a little dot that you could follow us. That's kind of a necessity that you have to have. So just for safety reasons.
Yeah, in a race like that, I would imagine. So you said you had a 30-liter pack also. Now, did the checkpoints allow you, were you able to refill water and stuff at the checkpoints at least?
Yep, exactly. That's what the checkpoints were for water refill. And we would always, now I took an hour at each one of those checkpoints. Well, the first one was like kind of like just a hut. So really it was the first 40 miles before I got to a checkpoint. Cause the first one was kind of like, hey, they had a couple of Twizzlers sitting on a table and they refilled our water. And then we spent like 4 minutes at that aid station. So, and that one was at 17 miles. And then the next one, I believe, was at 40. So 40 miles was really the first checkpoint. Now the checkpoints are cabins. So they're like remote cabins that you can rent out like through the State Department. And so when you go in them, they got a fire blazing and it's warm in there. And so we stripped down because we're wet from running, and our socks are wet. So we would hang our socks up and just kind of dry out and honestly spend about an hour at each one of the aid stations just to kind of unload a little bit and get your brain back and talk to somebody new.
Well, like when I look at your time, you actually finished this. You said the cutoff was 40 hours, but you finished in 33 hours and 52 minutes. And so if you spent an hour at some of your aid stations, I mean, you actually ran a sub 30 and you were flying.
Yeah, I think, it was about out of 4 of the aid stations, we spent about an hour. So yeah, probably a sub 30 if I would have, used the normal time that an aid station, 5 to 10 minutes or whatever. But honestly, here I am again. I don't care. It's like, I was out there for that experience. And it's one of those things like, yeah, it's still 100 miles, but it was a hard freaking mental grind of 100 miles. I ran it with this other guy named Brandon Woods, and that's his specialty. He runs winter ultras. That's what he loves doing. I think he's run the White Mountains like 5 times. There's another one called Susitna 100. He's run 5 or 6 times. He got into Arrowhead 135 this year. He's just a beast, right? And so I had his knowledge the whole time because we were kind of setting the pace at the same. So we kind of linked up and just ran the thing together. But just picking his brain the whole time, like, how do you freaking do this? Sucks. I want to see other people. I want to because in a normal 100, normal ultra, like you're seeing all kinds of people, you're moving around, talking to all kinds of people. You see an aid station every 5 to 10 miles. You don't have to carry as much weight, but it's just, yeah, it's wild.
So somebody who's listening to the show, they have heard this description of the race and they're interested. But in your opinion, who do you think this race is designed for? Who should consider signing up for the race? Like, what kind of personality, what kind of makeup does a person have to run a race like this? Like for me, I live in southeastern North Carolina. I'm terrified of something like this.
You know what? And I think that's a race that you should try to run just for the fact that it scares you.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and that's exactly right. I have a friend that lives in Florida and he runs Arrowhead 135 every year. He has no cold training at all. And he goes out there and he finishes Arrowhead 135 every year. And it's like one of those things. It's like White Mountain scared me. I was scared to start the race and I've never been scared to stand on a starting line, but it was just such an unknown. My wife was pissed that I was doing it because she's always my crew chief and she's always out there with me. And she had to like watch my dot from home, because she can't be out there. I mean, she could be at the start finish line because it's just a loop, but what are you going to be sitting out there for 30 hours waiting on me? So, but I think it's one of those things. It's like, why not try something that scares you? And I think you'd be the perfect person for it. Like, you're an experienced ultra runner. I would not start this as your first ultra because I would say this is kind of like the Hard Rock, right? You got to be an experienced ultra runner. It's a graduate level type race. Now, I'm not saying people don't go out there and run it for their first, but you got to have an understanding of how to deal with the cold. You have to have an understanding of how to deal with sickness. My feet are hurting. I have a blister. I have this little thing pop up that always pops up, right? It's not if something happens during an ultra, it's when it happens. And you got to be able to learn how to handle it yourself because no one else is out there to handle it for you. And so I do think that it is some sort of graduate level race. I wouldn't jump in there as your first one, but do something that scares you.
Yeah.
Challenge yourself.
Take me back to like one of the last aid stations that you're at. It's dark out. It's cold. It's that -10. You're in the checkpoint and the blazing fire's there. What do you say to yourself to psych yourself up? Like, I got to go back out in that cold. How do you get out of that heat and be like, this is really nice in here. I got to get moving. Besides the $200.
Well, yeah. So there's $200 that I got to pay. I don't want to pay. B, it's 60 miles one way and 40 miles the other way. So the options is clear which way I need to go. If I sit there, I'm probably going to sit there until the race is over. So I might as well just like walk out of there and see what I can do. Right. We came into that aid station at like probably 2:30 in the morning. And this is around the 60 to 62. Let's call it 100K. This is where that aid station is, where it's like middle of the night. It's cold. We're kind of we're running on a creek, right? So we're in the creek bottom. So we'd been up at real high elevation and then we dropped back down into this creek bottom. So you can only imagine like how cold it was. It was a super clear night. We get down to that aid station. My foot had already fallen through the ice. So my foot is cold, but I go into the checkpoint and the fire's blazing. It's hot in there. Right. So you're used to this like -10 temperature. You've kind of regulated your body. You know how to handle that. You have the proper amount of clothes on. So when you walk in there, you instantly just get hot. I started sweating. I was getting sick to my stomach. So I had to actually step out and cool myself off again before I could like go in there to kind of relax a little bit. I think it was just too much all at once. And then they had the soup and that's like the meatball stations, what they tell you. But the meatballs were cooked that morning for the fat bikers. And then, at 2 a.m., the meatballs are not good for us runners. So I took a bite of one and I was like, no, this is not for me. It was like a meatball, like rice soup. And like the person that's working that checkpoint, they're super nice and, very helpful to us runners, just out there slogging along. But it wasn't as hard as what you would think that you can need to go back out because you got another checkpoint, 20 miles. You know that the sun's is going to start coming up here in about 2 to 3 hours. And we all know when we run through the night, when that sun starts coming back up, we kind of just randomly get this energy back. And so then, you can start moving pretty good again. But Yeah. That aid station, that was one of the harder ones to leave. And then when we left that aid station, we had about a mile of what's called overflow. So it's that water that I was telling you rises out of the creek and then it refreezes. So it's just like solid, slick ice. And so we're trying to maneuver, and then like we'll take a step and the ice will crack and we're like, nope, don't step there, back up. And you're trying to just like find a way to get across. Oh, it was awful. And then our feet, both of our, mine and Brandon's that was with me, both of our feet fell through the ice and got our socks wet. So as soon as we got on the other side of that ice, we had to stop, take our socks off, change socks again. And so, yeah. So that's why when we would go in, we would take an hour because they'd have clothesline going across the checkpoint with all these little hooks, and you can hang your socks up because you wanted to hang your socks just in case you got in a bind and you had to change socks again. You at least had a dry pair of socks.
Mm.
But
so from a practical standpoint, like what kind of shoes are you wearing? Like, do they have spikes? You mentioned being on ice and stuff. So in my brain, again, Eastern North Carolina here, I'm thinking you're on an ice skating rink, right? Like, what are you wearing, like shoe wise and stuff for this?
all of what we run on is really like just trail shoes, right? But the trail shoes have little spikes on them. I don't like them because they are typically a stiffer shoe, and a stiffer shoe like hurts when I run on it. But like Hoka makes one, Solomon makes one, and then there's a real popular company called Icebug. They're a Swedish brand, but my experience with them is I haven't tried the Hokas yet, but my experience with the Solomons and the Icebugs is they're just real stiff. So I just wear normal trail shoes.
Really?
Yep. I mean, your shoes drain just like they normally would. And so I wear a like Darn Tough medium weight socks and just a normal trail shoe. And when your feet get like fall through the ice, because I think it happened like 3 or 4 times last year, not on just the race, but in normal training, you get to run through cool places that you don't get to run into in the summertime because they're swamps in the summertime, but all the swamps freeze up and you get to run new trails in the wintertime. But there's a certain point where it looks like they're frozen, but they may not be. And so my foot has fallen through. The shoe will freeze, the water drains out. That merino wool from the Darn Tough socks like keeps your foot insulated. And I mean, your foot may be a little cold, but it's not gonna, you're not gonna have like the black foot from Mr. Deeds.
That's all I think about whenever you said
I know
the ice.
Exactly. Yep. It's advisable to change your socks. But here's another thing you got to worry about. Your shoe is frozen, right? So when you fall through the ice, it gets wet. Your shoe freezes, the laces freeze. Like it's hard to get the shoe off. So you got to do it pretty quick, or once it's frozen, it's like you got to thaw it out before you get it off. But the trail shoes will drain, and your sock, if you're wearing the proper gear, it'll keep you warm.
So we talk about a lot, like at least with the athletes I work with, we talk about heat adaptations, like how do you train for running in warmer climates and that kind of thing. You mentioned earlier that, you have to train for these types of extreme conditions. What kind of protocol would you give a runner to kind of prepare for something like this, to be prepared for the cold, if you will?
Is it somebody who's living in the environment that I live in?
It's
or
me.
For you.
It's me who has no exposure to it. Like your friend in Florida, for example, like how does he prepare to come run Arrowhead from a temperature extreme? He
doesn't. He's scared. Yeah, he's scared. There's unless you can get up to those areas and train in those areas, there's no science to it where like heat training, like you can force heat adaptation onto your body. You can't force cold. But if you have an understanding of gear, you can manage it pretty easily. Gear is really important in cold weather. And it's like, yeah, I understand gear's important in all aspects of running, but it's especially important when you're running in these cold temperatures. Because most people think like we run in big puffy jackets and like 15 layers on our legs. And like I did, my coldest run last year was -38. I did 15 miles in -38. I wore a merino wool base layer. I wore a outer layer, like a jogger, insulated jogger. And then I wear puffy shorts. That's what I wear on my legs. So men are affected by cold in the front of their thighs and their, region. That's where cold affects us. Women get affected in the rear. The clothing is kind of designed for men and women to protect those areas. So the puffy shorts just have puffy in the front, where like women have puffy skirts that have protection in the back. A lot of men also run in the puffy skirts too, just because it's like 360 protection. And then like your top layer, just a merino wool. I'll wear just like the rabbit long sleeve, that real, cool material they have. I'll run in that with like a normal jacket up until about 0. And then I'll switch to merino wool. I may throw like, if it's really cold, I may throw like one of those little thin, like zip up, just a merino wool, like a thin 3/4 zip, and then like my jacket. But my jacket is just, it's basically a shell. It's not anything crazy. There's a fine balance. Like you don't want to sweat too much. And if you sweat too much, you're going to soak your clothes and you're going to get cold. As soon as you stop, you're going to get cold. And then but you don't want to have not enough on, because then you're going to be cold the whole time. It's always good to start your runs a little cold, because you're going to warm up as you start running. So I try to say less is more, but I don't want to spread that message, because then somebody goes out in a t-shirt and they're like, well, Justin said less is more, so we're good. And it's like, yeah, but it's still -30 out. Like, let's be honest.
Yeah, but I think your point earlier of this being more of I'm going to use the phrase, I don't know if you called it a graduate level 100 or not, but more of a recommendation for this race being one that you've got some experience under your belt at the 100-mile distance. And so if you've run a 100-mile before, regardless of the temperature zone that you're in, right? You know that during the day you're warmer than at night, because at night you're more than likely slowing down. And when you start slowing down, you're getting colder. Even if the temperature is 50 degrees, you get really cold in 50 degrees because you've been at 75 all day. And so that temperature extreme can be something that you should be aware of already as an ultra runner. So what you're saying even makes sense in your environment. It's like the same concept applies. It's just the layering that you kind of have to be prepared for. And so here where I'm at, we have 75 degrees today. So, I don't know what winter is. Well, let's switch gears a little bit, because one of your other races that caught our attention that you participated in was the Bighorn 100 in 2022. And, this theme of fun kind of just continues to permeate through my brain as we've talked about it the entire time. And you had, I believe I've heard you say this is one of your favorite hundreds also out there, the course and stuff. But if I recall correctly in the information you sent us before, and even some of the things I've heard, you had a kind of a bit of a low during this race.
Kind of.
So can you take, just for the listeners, just a quick overview of like the race itself and kind of this low that you experienced and what was going on really?
Well, first off, I just want to say that like, if you don't know about it, the Bighorn area has a 95,000 acre fire that took over the area. And so there's a lot of organizations out there that are helping people out, helping, giving funds, because a lot of people lost their homes. I mean, it's still burning as we speak right now. And so if you have some resources to give to that community, please do, because they've lost a lot. 95,000 acres took over that area and burned a vast majority of the course this year. And seeing some of the conversations with the race director she's put out, she said that we are going to hold the race. It may be a different course than what's traditionally held, but we are going to hold the race because it means so much to the community. I just wanted to preface to say that we're thinking about the individuals. That is my favorite race. I love that area. I love everything about how the Bighorn stands, leading into that it's a community event. The race, I believe, this might be the 32nd or 33rd year that they've held the race. Some of the aid stations, when they first started, were started by the parents, and they brought their kids out there. And then now those kids run the aid station. That's how much of a community involvement this race is. This was my second 100. I had run the Black Hills 100. Living in the Black Hills, is very familiar with the course. And so Black Hills was a great race, went well. Decided like, hey, why not run a little bit harder race? A couple big climbs. Yeah, let's upgrade a little bit. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I did not train for the Bighorn 100. I trained, but I didn't train like I should have for the Bighorn 100. It opens up with like a 4,000 foot climb through the canyon, 100% exposed. The race starts at 10 a.m. So by the time you get to the top, it's 1 p.m. You're going to laugh at this. I was fueling on what I thought was a good source of fuel, Spring Energy, awesome sauces. And so I thought, yeah, cool. Like I'm taking in 48 grams of carbs an hour.
Plenty.
Yeah, plenty, but now come to find out I was only taking in 15 grams of carbs. By the time I got to the 30-mile point, I was throwing up. I was so sick. it was bad. So my wife was running the 50K. So she saw me at the first aid station at like mile 13 or something, right? Still in high spirits because I just finished that big climb, didn't know what I was doing. But then she left and went and got sleep because, her race was starting the next morning. So my dad came out to crew me, and the race always happens on Father's Day weekend. So it was kind of cool that my dad was there too. But, at the 30-mile aid station, he's filling me with food. He has no idea what he's doing, but, he's figuring it out along the way. And as soon as I leave him, I cross the little line where they don't let crew go any further. And I was like, oh, I got to throw up. Instead of just like peeling off to go to the woods right there, I turn around and go right back to where my crew was and puke right there. Like, I have no idea what I was thinking, but I'm so underfueled, probably dehydrated because I was not expecting it to be over 100 degrees. I'm drinking as much water as I can. I didn't run with a bladder. I was just running 2 bottles, and it was a nightmare. It was crazy. I death marched from mile 30 to mile 48, which is the turnaround. I don't know how long that took me, but first 48 miles took me 17 and a half hours. And I was just like, it was so bad. You could pick up a crew at 30 miles. Because of how remote the aid stations are, they allow you to have a crew or a pacer at mile 30. So, because you see your crew at 13, 30, and 48, and then those same aid stations on the way back. But so I picked up a pacer at 30 who wasn't supposed to start until 48, but he was like, you look so bad. I'm just going to jump in with you right now. So we death marched for 17 and a half miles all the way up to the top. And it's about a 4,000 foot climb, but over 17 miles. That's also where you run into what's known as the Bighorn Mud. It's about 2 miles before the turnaround, you run into the mud. There was snow piled all the way to my head. We were walking through like cutouts of snow, and all that snow water, ice water was on the ground. So you're running through ice water. It was so cold. I got up to the turnaround. My calves had swollen up, I think from just like dehydration and like not taking in enough fuel. But I was eating all the way up. I started eating noodles. I ate a lot of noodles and stuff at the turnaround, and I put some calf sleeves on to help kind of mitigate some of the swelling. I thought they weren't going to let me out of that 48-mile aid station. I thought, because you do a medic check there, and I was like, the medic is going to look at me, and this is going to be my excuse to DNF. Oh, I got cut from the race. Darn, because I was in such a bad spot. I was like, this sucks. I'm ready to be done, but I was going to pull the plug. And then I got up there and my dad said, word for word, you're not fucking quitting this race. And I was like, all right, I guess we're going.
Happy Father's Day.
Right. Yeah. Yep, that's what he said. Apparently my wife had told him to don't let me quit. So that's what he told me. And then anyways, we walk out, we go back through all my pacer, the same pacer came back. So he ended up doing like about 36 miles with me, but came back. And I think just from all the noodles that I'd been eating through, the hike all the way up, and then the noodles that I ate at the 48-mile aid station, I got back down to that 4-mile aid station past the turnaround on the way back. And I started feeling good. And I don't know what happened, but I started running again. And I was like, what's going on? I got back down to the 30-mile, I believe it was like the 70-mile aid station at that point. And I surprised my crew. They were not expecting me to come in that early. And so I think at that point I was, 2 hours ahead of the cutoff. I was like, oh, well, I'm making up some good time. So I surprised my crew and, picked up a new pacer, and you have a big climb out of that 70-mile aid station, about a 3,000 foot climb in about 4 miles. That one sucks because there's like the creek running down the trail. And so it's like wet and muddy. You're muddy the whole time. Like you just admit you're going to be muddy. But yeah, I negative split the second half. I did it in 17 hours, and it was 50. So it's 40 miles up, 48 miles up, 52 miles down. The last 5 miles of the race is on a gravel road, 100% exposed. It's 100 degrees again, second day in a row. They have an aid station right before you start that. You come off the trail into the gravel road, and they have an aid station right there. And I was like, oh, I got 2 hours. I'm walking this out. So, me and my pacer that paced for the last 18 miles, I was like, hey man, I'm walking this. He's like, I don't care. Let's do it. So we walked it out.
So if you go all the way back to, you said mile 30 to mile 48, you started doing this. hike, walk, climb up the mountain, if you will, to the turnaround. You were death marching, right?
For sure.
So to come out of that and to be able to run again, you attributed that to being able to get some food in and everything. Do you think you hit the low because you were not taking enough calories in, or do you think it was dehydration? Like, what caused you to hit, do you think caused you to hit this point at mile 30 that now you're going to death march to mile 48 and try not to quit?
I don't think I was dehydrated because I was taking in a lot of water. I think just the underfueling is 100% what contributed to it. I had a coach and I was smart on fueling, but we all thought awesome sauce, 58 grams of carbs an hour or 50 grams of carbs an hour it's a pretty good amount. Yeah, that's a good amount, so preparing, I practiced that, I thought I was good. Now we find out I was duped into thinking I had 50 grams of carbs. And I don't know if you've seen some of my social media posts, but I've been blocked by Spring Energy. So they don't like the
Many
content
people
that
have
I put out.
Many people.
I let them know what I think through some of my reels, but yeah, I 100% contributed to underfueled. A lot of digestive issues are because of fueling. I mean, heat doesn't plays a huge factor in that as well, but you have the heat, you have the mileage that you're running. I was underprepared for what I was taking on. I was living in the Black Hills, but we don't have big climbs like the Bighorns do. So I was unprepared in that aspect of things. Just all those contributing factors, like, of course it's going to end up in disaster, but I kept on marching on. One thing I learned, a lot can be solved with time and food. And that was a contributing factor to that 100%.
Yeah. And I apologize for starting to interrupt there. I didn't mean to, because that's exactly what I was thinking is that there's a lesson learned here for you. And also that's applicable to the athletes that we kind of work with, right?
Oh, 100%.
It's that you hit a low. It doesn't mean your race is over. Now you can mentally start to check out. Fortunately, your dad came and solved that problem, that riddle for you, right? But let's assume that you can solve the mental riddle, but there's a physical side that you can solve as well. And so like you're saying, if you're in a low, one of the first things that we would recommend is, hey, probably trying to take in some calories. Have you been taking enough calories in? If the answer to that's yes, then you're going to check your sodium, your electrolytes, you're going to check your hydration. Like you need to kind of run through a checklist of things to counteract this low. And I think the lesson in that for what you even experienced is something that would translate to anybody listening to the show, anybody that we work with as runners, to kind of understand that you can overcome a low by simply taking the time, but also putting in the food, calories, hydration, sodium, that kind of thing that can help you get out of that mood. The problem is they don't trust that in the moment.
Yep.
So is it like, do you really, I mean, not really, like, do you think because of your experience, but you'd only done 100 at that point, do you think that because you had a pacer and your dad kicking you out of the aid station, it just forced you to allow that truth to come out?
I think so, yeah, because I was ready to be done. I mean, my pacer knew it. I wouldn't have finished without him. I mean, I think he saved my race. Yeah, my dad kicking me out of the aid station, but that was a 5-minute type deal. I mean, my pacer is 100% what I contribute to finishing that race. He was the one that was, you're going to eat here. This is where we're going to stop. I'm going to get you some food. You're going to sit down. You're going to eat. We get to the next aid station. You're going to eat. As we're moving through those aid stations, hey, every hour, take in your gel or take in whatever kind of food you're eating. We're going to eat. And so like I contribute to finishing to him because yeah, your physical aspects of the race, like start to take the toll, right? We talked about the heat and the underfueling and all of that starts to take toll. And because of that, you start throwing up. You feel like shit. Like your legs are starting to hurt. Your calves are cramping up. Everything is starting to happen. When all that happens, then your brain starts to go, your mind starts to go. And then you're like, all right, I'm done. I'm quitting. But not taking that experience that I did not have and saying, okay, I know how to solve these problems. You know, I know what to do. I didn't have that yet. So that's where my pacer stepped in, who had that experience and be like, okay, let's just take it one step at a time, one aid station. You can go 4 more miles. Let's go 4 more miles. Let's sit down, take a break. I'll get you some food. And I think just through all of that, like it took, I don't remember how long it took to get to the next aid station, but it took a while. But, you know, 4 aid stations in between, 3 or 4 aid stations in between, like I was able to come out of it.
That's great.
So,
yeah. So like when Steve and I were deciding we want to put this podcast together and start doing this type of show for runners and stuff, it was like, how do we help runners begin to put together a plan or blueprint, if you will, for their ultras? And so the thing that you said even there that I want runners and listeners to do, and even that we tell our athletes is you're going to have a pacer. And what you can actually do is if you take what Justin, what you're saying now, what we've even said on other platforms as well, is tell your pacer that if you're in a piss poor mood, have you eat.
Yep.
Check on your eating, check on your hydration, and go ahead and give them those instructions. And so a lot of people who are planning their next races and everything, they may have a pacer set up, and they need to give those types of instructions to the pacers to say, these are some things you can look out for. And when you see this happen, force me, encourage me, whatever word you want to use there, to eat, drink, take my electrolytes in or something, but ultimately keep moving and trust that I will come out of that. So I think it's a great point that you're making. So that's why we really want to talk about the big one, because we knew it was a bit of a struggle fest for you at a point. And I think there's something in there for us.
So one of the hardest things that I've seen, and to kind of help with the runners who are at the back of the pack in terms of like that, when you said anything can be healed with time and food, when you throw on that extra anxiety of coming up against that cutoff, because, I've been on it myself at this past Mugion where it's like, hey, like I got to grab a Coke and I got to grab I fill up my water and I got to go and I got to move. So like, what do you tell your athletes if they're going in already at the pace where they're maybe right up against that cutoff? How do you come over it? Like, how do you help them out with that extra anxiety? Because that's a real mental drain as you're doing mental math the entire race.
Yeah. Trail math. Well, if I got 14 pigs and 13 elephants, I think I can make it in 17 spaceships. Yeah, that's a tough one, honestly. The biggest piece of advice that I can give is just keep moving. Don't stop. Whether you're running or if you've been forced to a walk or power hike, as we like to call it, just keep moving. And I was up against those cutoffs, right? I might not have been as like close as the cutoff as what some would have been. I think I was all within 2 to 3 hours of the cutoff, but 2-3 hours on a 100-miler is nothing. That can overtake you really quick. And so I finished in the golden hour, but I think that was because I stupidly walked the last 5 miles. But yeah, you just have to keep moving. Like, don't stop. If you get into an aid station and you're going to be close to the cutoff, like maybe sit down for a couple seconds to just take the load off and maybe let your brain rest a little bit, but then get up and get your Coke and get your snacks and eat on the walk out. I think that's the most important piece of advice is, the longer we sit at the aid station, that clock doesn't stop ticking.
Yeah, I was going to say that I encourage runners that are slower that I work with, that when they're going into the race, if you think you're going to be pushing cutoffs, then you can practice eating while you walk. Like you should do training runs where you're learning how to eat while you move. And it's okay to practice that now. And the other thing is that most of those runners are going to have a pacer more than likely. And so when they're in the race itself, they should have a plan going into that aid station. And so their pacer can move a few steps ahead of them to begin to execute that plan before they get there. And so we tend to think of an aid station and now I got to stop and reset everything. If you've got a pacer and you have a plan, that pacer can execute that plan with you and for you as you move through the aid station a lot quicker than just kind of sitting around. So if you're pushing, pushing the cutoffs and stuff, you still have to eat. You still have to take care of those things because your race is going to be derailed, but you may need to really get your pacer on board with how they can execute your plan and having a plan going into the aid station, not trying to figure out what you're going to do when you get there.
Yeah, I think that's extremely an important part of running it, and especially as having a pacer. It's a really great point that you put up is having that plan with your pacer and before the race even starts, having the conversations with your pacer about this is what I expect of you. As we're coming into aid stations, we're going to have a plan. I may not be in the physical mind to think about that plan. That's your job as the pacer. I need you to ask me, what do you want? Right. I need you to ask me, where's my water levels? Like, do I need refill the waters? Like, I need you to do X, Y, and Z because I may not be in that point where I am thinking clearly like, oh no, I'm good. I can just walk on through. No, absolutely not. So having those conversations with your pacer before the race, it can greatly enhance your experience for sure.
Yeah, it's kind of like the three of us have boasted about our crew chiefs, right? We know that when we go into the aid station, like my wife immediately starts taking all the trash out of my pocket. She's starting to pull more about. There's no conversation. It's kind of like I'm like on pit crew, right? She's just changing the wheels and we're rolling out. Like it's because of experience and having done that multiple times. And so the only reason we're getting through those aid stations as fast, but
Yeah, right.
fast, right, is because we generally have that kind of support, that of somebody who knows what needs to be done when we get there. So, yeah, Bighorn, great experience, man.
I love it. I love that
Yeah.
race. Love everything about it. Go run it.
Steve, you got any other questions on Bighorn?
No, I don't think so. I think that was it.
Awesome. We're getting close to wrapping up, but we would be slack, if you will. We would not be paying attention. You actually host a podcast called the Golden Hour Adventures Podcast as well. So I'd love for you to take just a minute to, if you could tell us about the podcast, who it's for. I mean, why should people listen to that show?
Well, we started the podcast because my co-host and me, we were so sick and tired of listening to the pro runners, right? Every podcast with the pro runners, it's like, oh, hey, your 7-minute splits on this 100-miler were great. And it's just like, God, that does not resonate with me. And
Right.
yeah, there is a lot of podcasts out there that host other people, but we're like, where are the back of the packers? Where are the golden hour finishers? So we started a podcast called Golden Hour Adventures Podcast. And our slogan is featuring everyday people doing extraordinary things.
Mhm.
Because the mom that has 3 kids that works a 9 to 5, 40 hours a week, that runs 100-milers, that's who I want to listen to. The dad that gets up before all of his family does on a Saturday and does a 20-mile long run on the trails, and then comes home and entertains his kids all day, works a 9 to 5. The military guy that goes on a deployment and trains on a deployment away from his family, and then comes back and runs a 100-miler. Those are the people, those are the stories I want to hear. And so, and I, our 4, we like to say we have 4 listeners. It's both our moms and our grandmas, but it's been cool to connect with so many people that listen to the podcast that appreciate, listening to that everyday athlete, because like I said earlier in this podcast, 99.9% of us, this is a hobby.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if we can highlight those people that are doing really cool things, that's what I want to do. We did not start out wanting to be a running podcast. We have had hikers, professional bull riders, unicyclist, split board runners, rider. I don't know what they call themselves. Split boardist. I don't know. We've had all kinds of facets of people. We still automatically end up interviewing runners. So we decided not to do a running podcast when we started, but we've just kind of fallen in the niche because Robbie and I are both ultra marathoners. So now we have a running podcast, but yeah, it's a great podcast. I'm a little bit biased because I'm a co-host of it, but we've been doing it for 2 years now. We have over 100 episodes on any platforms. We release an episode every Monday. We haven't missed a Monday yet. Sometimes we'll do a Thursday if need be, but yeah, it's a great podcast, and I love the connections that we have been able to make through the podcast. It's a lot of fun doing it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It sounds like a great show. I've listened to a few episodes. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
And I love the premise. I think, it's like you said, 99% of the people are not elite runners. They're sitting around trying to figure out, can they do this? It's the same premise that Steve and I have. Is like, how do you help them come up with a plan? Like, because, they're always asking us questions as athletes. They come to me and say, how do you do this? Like, do I have what it takes, or what will it take me to do something like this? And we're like, well, okay, so why don't we just do a podcast of helping explain how to kind of put the pieces together and interview guests who've had their experiences and say, okay, hey, there's something Justin said that maybe they can take out and use for themselves in their own plan. Then that's a win, right? Because everyone is going to have to create their own way to get it done, because it is a suffer fest or a challenge fest or whatever you want to call it, to do 100 miles or whatever that distance is, but it is very, very doable. And we believe that people can do it. They just question whether or not they can, right? And so we want to help them with that. And so I love what you and Robbie are putting together. I think it's a great show, and I encourage anybody to listen to this one. Go check it out. Subscribe to him. Make sure you follow them as well. I think it's fantastic. You cannot have too many podcasters putting out good content if it's really going to help runners take their steps and move forward into their ultra running scene. And so I think it's a fantastic thing. So
For sure.
Really, that's awesome. So upcoming, you have got Western States. I know that you're not signed up for yet. You were going to put yourself in the lottery. I think I heard that correct.
Yep. Chasing Western. We'll see if I get in. I have 4 tickets this year, so I won't get in, but Actually, this is a super inconvenient year for me to run Western States. So
you'll probably get in.
So
Yep,
I'll probably get in, and I'm kind of relying on that because it's going to be really inconvenient. Me and the wife are expecting our very first child.
Oh, congratulations.
Congrats.
Thank you. We don't know the gender, so they will be born in December. So you can only imagine starting to train February, March timeframe is not going to be really convenient for a June race. And so so you'll see me at Western States because I'm going to get in.
100% you're going to get in.
Yeah, exactly. And then I have Cowboy 200. I am officially signed up for it. Chase and Casey Hammond that run that race are phenomenal people. I ran the Hill Creek 100 with them. And man, the way they put on a race is just super grassroots. It's kind of getting back to our roots as ultra runners. Chase is sitting there flipping burgers at the aid stations and like, it's just such a cool environment with those guys. And so I really wanted to support them. And so we're trying to sell out Cowboy 200 through the podcast. So yeah, I'm signed up. Robbie's going to sign up and run it as well. So we're going to take Golden Hour Adventures to Nebraska.
That's
fantastic.
awesome.
Yeah, I have talked to both of them before. They are fantastic race directors. It is a very cool race. I've been telling my own folks around here that's one of the races that if I'm going to do my first 200, it'd be one of the ones I would do because it looks to be very much like the area that I run in.
Yeah.
And so it seems
Well, it sounds
ideal.
like 25. You could just come out and run it with us.
Well, I'll be running Western States also as my goal. And so
Okay.
I probably can't pull off that 200 a couple months later, unlike yourself, who is probably going to be able to do both.
I'm going to slog through both of them. Let's be honest.
Are you doing anything a little bit different in your 200, the training that's coming up for there?
I am going to incorporate a lot of walking into my training. And I do incorporate walking in my training as it is because let's be honest, everybody who runs ultras also walks ultras.
Mhm.
But I don't feel that a lot of people practice walking. And
You're right.
so I actually practice walking. And I've become really good at being able to withstand and withhold a really quick pace in walking because of practice, right? And so I'm going to practice a lot of walking. And so I do have a coach, but somebody that we've talked a little bit about doing the 200 and the training for it. And I just think it's going to be so important to learn how to walk fast and would be able to withstand and withhold that pace for a long period of time. And so I think that's what's going to be different as opposed to like running, X amount of miles a week. I'm going to incorporate a lot of walking into that as well. So have a lot more time on feet because of it.
That would be my one suggestion is just focus on time on feet for that whole entire thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you plan to practice like a sleep strategy? We hear about that a lot in 200s. Obviously, I know, Steve, you've done 250 a few times. You know about the importance of having a sleep strategy, but do you plan to train a sleep strategy? Like for me, if I'm looking at doing the 200, I'm thinking, how do I deal with that?
I've talked to a lot of people that have run 200s and I picked everybody's brain. Everybody does it different. And I have a friend that has run 6 days in the dome multiple times. And we interviewed her on the podcast. Her name's Lindsay. She has run 300 X amount of miles every time. She's actually going to go try to break the record at 400 miles for a woman in this next year. And what she said kind of resonates me. It's like sleep when you're tired. Mm-hmm. And so if that's a 5-minute power nap on the trail, take that 5-minute power nap on the trail. And then when you get to a point where you're at a sleep station, like take an hour to sleep. And that kind of resonated with me. I do not plan on practicing a sleep strategy. I think I'm just going to, I don't know, maybe shoot for the wind and see what happens. But I liked what she said. It's like when you're tired, take a little power nap. If it's 5 minutes, it's 5 minutes. But we all know that little 5-minute nap can kind of bring you back to life. And so I don't know, you may have a way better outlook on things since you've run multiple 200, Steve, but I don't know what you think.
Yeah, no, I would kind of agree with Lindsay too. Like I try to run as far as I can run and then sleep for like a good hour to get that first one out of the way. And then at least this last one I did was pretty much every aid station my crew was at, I'd either take like a half hour, 45-minute nap after eating. And that really just, like I'm not going to have to win it. I just want to finish the damn thing.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
that really just sets me up for success from aid station to the next aid station. And then if something hits me where I'm death marching, I'd rather take a 10-minute not death nap, a 10-minute nap, 10-minute trail nap, and then wake up and then move a little bit faster than the death march. Like maybe I'm doing 18 to 15-minute mile instead of 25 to 30-minute mile after 10-minute nap, and you make that time up. That's,
For sure.
that's what I would suggest.
Yeah. Cool.
That's awesome. Well, if I don't get into Western, maybe I'll come see you at the Cowboy 200. How about that?
I'll look forward to seeing you there.
That'll be fun. Well, before we wrap up, we do this feature on our show that we call Coach's Corner. And it's just a segment that we use, and we take questions from social media, or if somebody reaches out through email or some other way, they contact us and give us a question for us to answer on the show. And so we answered as coaches, and we also invite our guests to also answer as well. So
stumping me over here.
No. Well, here's the good news. So this is going to be our third episode, right? On our first episode, we actually had the guest answer first. And so poor John, we made him answer the question first. We're never going to do that again, because I was like, we should not have made it so awkward. So because we didn't know what we're doing, right? So now that we're on episode 3, we will answer the question first and then give you a chance to answer. But you're a coach as well, so you will have no problem with this question either.
Perfect.
So Steve, me or you want to go with it, or myself?
I can read it. So Bill from Topeka, Kansas asked, what's your favorite go-to food? Is it a real food or is it gels during a race? And then if it's a gel, what's your favorite gel or food? Fake food.
You want to go, Steve?
Sure. I used Humagels for my fake one. I use the ones that have the electrolytes in it and like a little shot of caffeine in it. I think I try to go more natural in terms of like the gels. And the last one that I had pretty much at every aid station for Cocodona was instant mashed potatoes and ramen. And I just mixed them up together in the same bowl and just shoveled it home. It was fantastic.
I'm trying not to be nauseous.
No, that's actually a really good idea. I like that.
No, I'll kill him.
Yeah.
Not the instant though. I'd have to have the real deal.
Yeah, so that's all I'm imagining is those flakes of potatoes.
Well, they were cooked.
Yikes. Sure. So for me, my favorite fake food would be, I use Precision Hydration gels, not gels, chews, excuse me. I will use those. They have 30 grams of carbs per chew, or per pack of chews. And so there's 15 grams in each little square. They're mild. They have a lemon and lime flavor, I think, or lemon and mint flavor, excuse me. Super mild, super easy to consume. They don't cause me any GI issues at all. And then I also use Morton's, their gels as well, because those seem to slide down really well. For my real food, I guess my most recent favorite real food is at the Canal Corridor. I just did a couple weeks ago, that 100. I ate their grilled cheese sandwiches and absolutely loved them. And a strong second was they had these, and I didn't really get into them, but everybody was dying for these grilled peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. So I will be trying those next. So I can't really claim those, but grilled cheese is my current favorite. Justin, what about you? Fake food.
I ate a grilled peanut butter and jelly sandwich, thinking it was a grilled cheese at the Oregon Cascade 100 in August. And I burped it up for the next 7 to 8 miles. So I will not be making that mistake again.
So no on the grilled PB&J.
It was not for me. Let's say that it was not for me. I primarily race on gels. I said earlier I'm in the military, so I don't have the money to train on gels, because those are pretty expensive. So I do a lot of Precision Fuel gels and Morton gels. That I think they're super easy on the stomach and they go down super easy. And then I run a lot of candy, because candy is really good carb load. So like 15 candy corn. Don't come at me with the candy. Don't come back with the hate on the candy corn. But 15 little candy corns are 30 grams of carbs. They also have the little pumpkins. So I stock up during the Halloween time. The little pumpkin deals, 3 of them is like 30 grams of carbs. So it's a little, you don't have to carry that much, and you got tons of carbs in your pockets. But that's I like all the little gummies. I take the gummies, but you got to look at like carb per dollar type thing. And you're going to get a lot of carb per dollar out of your candy than you are your gels. And so I use gels in a race because it's very convenient, but I use a lot of candy and stuff when I'm training, just training for the race. Real food, I'm a really big ramen guy. I love ramen, and then I love quesadillas too.
That's awesome. Yeah, quesadillas are great. Also, I do like those. Those are a strong second for me as well.
Yeah.
I feel like a spreadsheet of carb per dollar for like candy and gels would be awesome to put together.
Oh man, I should put something together. Yeah.
Don't give him more content ideas.
Oh, have you not seen? I've been doing this thing where I try gels. So I spent my own money and I bought all these gels and I've been trying them and I tagged the company in them, regardless if I like it or not. And man, I've been getting some hate for some Crank Sports. They don't like me because I came at them hard with one of their gels, but it's like a double goo. You know, goo is freaking gross. No one takes goos anymore. They're like the Long John Silvers, them and Hammer, like the Long John Silvers of the running fuel community. Who is laundering money through that company to keep the gels flowing, right?
But they're so popular in the
I don't get it.
Well, it's because
there's so much better stuff out there.
I think it's just so popular in the 10K half marathon community that's just what they're used to doing. And so, Steve, I know you. I don't want to name your store because I don't know if I'm allowed to do that or not, but at your store, like you're a part of, like you guys sell those a lot, and it's primarily to road runners because that's their own exposure. I think with ultra runners, we know we're consuming this all the time. We're like, I need to explore different options because those products can be hard on the stomach.
Yeah.
It's good when you have.
I'm trying to be very nice about how I'm saying that.
Yeah.
Crank Sports is a double goo. So imagine 2 goos in one packet. That's Crank. And now a lot of people like them. I got a lot of hate for it, but whatever. I don't care. Come at me.
So needless to say, Justin, Crank Sports will not be sponsoring my podcast or your podcast.
No, and I'm sorry about that. I apologize. Their liquid nutrition is really good. I gave it a 9 out of 10. It was really good. I gave their other one a 5 out of 10. And so,
well, we got
and then like I didn't eat it all and it spilled in my pack and my pack was all sticky. And I was like, this is the gift that keeps on giving.
All right, Justin, this has been fantastic. Been a great time getting to know you, learning a lot about your just experiences. And I think everything we've talked about has just been a huge asset and value add to those who stuck around and listened to it. Hopefully they're taking some notes. And so if somebody's listening and they want to keep up with you, is the best way to do that through Instagram?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram, running and stash, running _in _stash. Type in running and stash, it'll pop up. I'm on TikTok, also running and stash. If you're looking for a coach, I coach through RMC, Rising Mountain Coachings. So if you're interested in coaching, hit us up, send us an email, hit us up on social medias. Do one last plug for the podcast. If you're interested in Golden Hour Ventures, go give it a listen. We're on all platforms.
That'd be great. And if you can send me the link to your coaching website, I can include that in the show notes as well. I'll definitely include the podcast as well as your Instagram account, your handles for both. But Justin, thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us, really. And thank your wife for giving up the evening as well, to hang out with us. We really appreciate it. For those who are listening, thank you also for taking the time to download the episode, to listen. And hopefully you're out there enjoying your running, you're finishing it up. But if you could take a moment just to give us a rating, subscribe, do all the fancy things that all of us podcast hosts ask all the time for you to do. We just appreciate you so much. And thank you for taking us on the ride with us. So again, until next time, we will talk soon.
Thank you.